Pop Recovery Systems, led by visionary Laura Alexis. Pop Recovery Systems, redefining surgical recovery with bariatric expert Dr. Eric Smith. Innovating surgical preparation and recovery, Pop Recovery Systems blends nutrition, mental health, and wellness.
Breaking through the noise and changing an industry. Join Laura Alexis and Dr. Eric Smith on the Pop Culture Podcast.
How's it going, man?
It's going great. Good to be here. Good to see you.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. I was saying earlier, it's nice to have another bariatric surgeon on that she can pelter the whole time, with all these questions. And we have all these different guests, and we intentionally try to bring people in from different, sports and entertainment and music and all this good stuff, and always bring it back to what we talk about, health and wellness, obviously.
Yeah.
But this will be fun because now we can talk shop, right?
Absolutely. We can dish on everything bariatric, TLC, whatever's out there.
Excited about that. So I was reading through your questionnaire, and one thing that really stood out to me, because I never would ever associate a bariatric surgeon with sales anything, that you sold almanacs. You said, I guess, in Russia, and I was like,
so obviously I wasn't very good at it, so I had to go find another job. So yeah, I was a little wayward. I did college twice. I think Eric and I both have some Ohio roots. I actually went to high school and college the first time in Ohio. I went to Miami, Ohio. And I had a degree in diplomacy and foreign affairs with a minor in Russian because, this is 1990s. This is, Cold War era. I'm going to be a spy. I'm going to go, join the CIA or something. And unfortunately, I majored a little bit more in fraternity than I did in my studies. So I graduated. I'm like, why isn't anybody banging my door down, to offer me a job? And I realized I don't really have many marketable skills here. So I actually got an internship the summer after I graduated with this Russian guy in Washington, D.C., who had been on Gorbachev's Reform Committee. And he had a business partner back in Russia. This is early days of the internet, right? You couldn't just Google anything. So they created atlases on every Russian government official. So if you want to look up, Novosibirsk, who's the Russian minister of, foreign lumber, and look that up. Of course, these jobs change week to week. So as soon as it was printed, it was outdated. And on Russian businesses. So if a lumber manufacturer in Russia wanted to meet up a paper manufacturer in the United States and do business, then, this is how they would connect. And so they had him printed in a bunch of different languages. I worked for him for about a semester, and he said, at the end of the semester, I don't have money to hire you, but how about if I send you to Moscow? I still have my office at Moscow State University. You can live with my mother-in-law, and you can run around and sell these atlases to the different embassies. So that was my winter of '95, and learned really quickly after being in Moscow for a winter that I really liked being in the United States, and specifically in the Southeast, and tucked my tail between my legs and took my open air flight back home, and said, okay, let me figure out what else I'm going to do here.
Oh man, that's hilarious.
Yeah.
So have you ever gone back to Russia since then?
No, not since then.
You're still scarred.
I'm still scarred. That's right. It was maybe not Moscow, but there's some beautiful areas there. And I'd love to go back now and see how much it's changed. Maybe after things cool off a little bit, but other places to go and see.
Yeah. I think there's a few higher ones on the list, maybe a little bit better weather too.
That's right.
So you obviously came back, and I know a little bit of this, but for everybody listening, you came back, and how did you end up kind of redirecting into medicine? I know your father is a surgeon as well, but kind of how did all that start when you decided, okay, this is not for me, and I want to go into medicine?
It started again. Thankfully, I had really bad grades my first time around, and so my family at that point, I had moved back down to Georgia. My dad had been a vascular attending surgeon at Oshner Clinic in New Orleans, and then moved to Georgia. And I said, well, University of Georgia is right there. I'll apply there, and I'm going to try to get into the business school. And they sent me a very polite letter back saying, Mr. Procter, we we appreciate the fact that you have a college degree, but you don't have the prerequisites it takes to get into our business school as a freshman. So you're going to have to start over. We'll let you in, but you're going to start over taking a bunch of remedial type classes. And I said, you know what? If I'm going to do that, if I'm going to be there for an extra amount of time, I had these thoughts of going to medical school early on. Why don't I just re-explore that? And honestly, I didn't even want to talk to my folks about it. I started kind of sneaking in a biology here and a chemistry there and so forth. And I had this amazing discovery, this epiphany, that if you wake up and you go to class and you go home afterwards and you open your book and you read, you can actually do well in those classes. I had no idea. I was gonna, I was gonna, write a book about this, and so the more I got into it, the more I enjoyed it, and pathologically, really growing up, I didn't want to be a doctor. My folks
Right.
had just graduated from high school when they had me, and so I went through college and medical school and residency and 3 fellowships and all that with my dad, and said, you know what, wherever I
Yeah.
go in life, I'm not going to be a doctor. And so then pathologically, I went to the same medical school, same residency program, and ended up doing the same thing he does.
So your dad went to UK for training?
He did. He did.
I
He
didn't
trained
know
with,
that.
yeah, he trained with Ward Griffin back in the day, which is
Okay.
when UK was kind of a mecca for bariatric surgery. Ward Griffin modified the old Mason procedure to create the modern day gastric bypass. And so they were doing a ton of that as residents, and that's something he just sort of carried on afterwards. And later on down the road, when he came back to Georgia, he decided to make that a part of his practice. He did general vascular, and he was the only guy around at that point doing bariatrics, and he established the first center of excellence up in Gainesville, Georgia.
Very cool. I
So
did
the
not know that.
University of Kentucky is it has medical school there, right?
Correct. It
Yeah.
does.
Right. Because I know Dr. Rednam went there as well. So is it like one of the sought
So she
after?
went. So Dr. Rednam, she did her residency there.
Okay.
She may have gone to med school there, but I honestly don't know that she went to actual med school. But she did her training there, and
Does
that's where
every
Dr. Procter he
university
did his
have med
residency.
school?
Everyone doesn't, but University of Kentucky does have a medical school. Some medical schools are associated with universities. Some, see, let me let you in on this, Charlie. So sometimes we have to bare bones it down for Laura. She likes to ask these really basic questions, so
Yeah.
it makes us sound really smart because we don't even have to get really deep. Uh-oh, we lost you.
Yeah, I'm back.
He's back.
So
Well, I
yes,
ask the questions that sometimes people are afraid to ask, but I'm
you're
not afraid to
exactly
ask.
right, Laura.
I was never
I'm picking on
interested,
you.
and
You
I
know,
know I don't mind, but I was never interested in medical school.
right.
Actually, when I was 9, I wanted to be a pediatric surgeon until I figured out what they did, and then I decided I didn't want to do that. But I always thought that medical school was only in like Harvard and Yale
Yeah.
and Princeton, and that's it.
Yeah. It's interesting because there's so many different locations of medical schools, and there's a role for all of them. And I'm interested to get your take on this, but we need academia. There's no doubt we need academia. They do a lot of stuff as far as research and things like that. But many times academia spends a lot of time in research, and some of us that trained in more community-based hospitals or maybe associated with the university, but more kind of in the city, just, it's the knife and gun club, whatever shows up at the door, that's where the volume is. And, so I was never like a name chaser. I was like, I don't feel like I have to go to this blank U. I just wanted to see as much as possible. And I'm sure with
Yeah,
where
no,
you trained, you were the same way.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. So I went to Medical College of Georgia for medical school down in Augusta, and I felt very fortunate. Our first year when we took anatomy, we had one of the last PhD anatomy professors out there, and I've got excellent teaching from him. So I couldn't say enough about that. I did my first 3 years at the University of Kentucky, and then and you're exactly right. It was the hospital for people who couldn't afford to go to the nice hospitals in town. It was an academic center, but after 5 o'clock, it was the residents and the residents only. If you were a second or third year resident, you took care of all the trauma and all the ICU care. So we got wonderful training in that. Um, at the end of my third year, my mother got sick. We found out she had metastatic breast cancer, and I thought it would be important to get uh, down closer to home in Georgia. So I was looking to transfer, and I actually sent out letters all over the Southeast. Kentucky was great. They worked with me. They actually put me into their critical care program so that I could spend a year doing that. I'd be able to travel back and forth. But last minute, Greenville, South Carolina reached out and they needed a fourth year. So I ended up transferring to Greenville, South Carolina, now Prisma, for my fourth and fifth year, and that was a community medical center. Eric, I got there and I thought, you know what, this is going to be cake, secondary to after coming out of Kentucky and so forth, and they beat me like a redheaded stepdog for about 2 years, but it's fascinating, and you can attest to this as you're going through these steps that the connections that you make. I was able to be Will Cobb and Will Hope and Alfie Carbonell, who became some of the biggest, hernia guys out there, and got a love for that and doing that, and was able to collaborate back and forth with them. And when I started my practice, I was doing a lot of these big ab wall reconstructions, and I was one of the first ones in Georgia to start doing a whole lot of that. Um, Eric Bohr, who I got to know but never got to rotate with him, was their bariatric surgeon at the time, who later became a CEO of one of the Piedmont hospitals here in town. He's now doing surgery in Athens now, but he was a bit of a mentor for me too. So all these steps along the way have, they're all part of your tapestry, and every move, whether you perceive it as good or bad, can always have a good outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. It all has a place, and at the time you may be a little bummed that it happens, or it may seem like a roadblock, but you look back on it, and it really ends up making you who you are. Laura and I talk about that all the time. So, your father was already in practice when you went back to Georgia. Did you join him, or did you kind of start something separate, or were you doing bariatrics kind of right away, or was that something that you just kind of grew your love into as that started to grow?
Yeah, great question. Actually, I was at the end of my fifth year residency and I was kind of lost. I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I was looking to do vascular, which was his kind of first specialty. At the last minute, I decided that really wasn't me. So I applied and interviewed for the trauma program at Grady Hospital in Atlanta, and
Oh wow.
I was gonna be a trauma surgeon, and my dad called me up one day and said, first of all, my wife said, if you do that, I'm going to divorce you. So that played into it a little bit. But my dad said, I did a trauma fellowship, and it's fun while you're a young man, but after a while, it's becoming less and less operative. As you know, it's a lot of babysitting ortho and neuro
Right.
injuries, and you're going to get tired of waking up in the middle of the night and taking care of drunk people in car accidents. And he said, if you come join me, we'll teach you how to do a laparoscopic hand-sewn gastrojejunostomy on people who are 300 plus pounds. If you can do that, you could do anything. And I said, you know what? I was at that position or that time in residency programs where not a lot of programs had highly skilled laparoscopic attendings. So, the bulk of my laparoscopic training was really appendectomies and gallbladders. There was nobody doing hernias and nobody doing bowel resections. Hiatals were kind of a new thing. So I had very minimal training in that. So most of my on-the-job training was through the bariatrics. So I scrubbed in with he and his partner for about 100 cases before I got to flip to the other side of the table and start fumbling through my own first cases. And as you know, it's intoxicating when you are able to operate on these folks and you see this massive change in their life occurring, and you can't get enough of it. You want to see it happen over and over again. So that's a long answer to how I got into bariatrics.
So when it came to your dad, did he have his own practice, or did he was he a part of a hospital, or how did that, like, what was your first setting I mean, you started working with him. So what was that setting like? I know you
Yeah.
said his partner, but I think you guys all have partners in a way.
Yeah,
So
so
does
sort of the pathologic way of, I guess I followed him. He did have his own private practice. It was
okay.
Gainesville, Georgia is sort of the northeast corner of Georgia. It's a great hospital system, but one in which either half the town is employed by the hospital, the other half was in a large multi-specialty group,
Okay.
which subsequently has now been bought out by the hospital. So he was a holdout. He had his own private practice. So I was the third person in there. And that eventually, after about 2.5 years, merged into the large multi-specialty group. I was with them for almost 2 years before leaving and coming to Atlanta.
Okay, and starting your own.
It's got to be cool to get to work with your father. I'm sure there are times you butted heads because that's normal. But I have a really good friend who's a physician, and his son is like one of his junior partners now. And I've got two boys. Neither one of them ever really considered medicine. I was always very careful. I never discouraged it, but I never pushed it. I didn't want to crush their dreams and say don't do this on a bad day, but I also didn't want them to feel like they had to be a physician. And one of my boys, he spent a little time in the OR with me just out of curiosity. Now he's way smarter than I am. He's an aerospace engineer major at
Oh,
Alabama,
good for him.
so but I've watched my good friend whose son is in practice with him, and they jump on a call and they talk about cases and stuff like that. And I think that's just so cool, to be able to share that. I'm sure that was a really cool experience for you to be able to, share cases with your dad, run things by your dad, but also experience that outcome. Your first experience of seeing truly how people's lives changed after bariatric surgery was in the midst of sharing that with your father.
It was. And, it was something that he always talked about. I mean, yes, he did a lot of vascular surgery, which he thought was very cool. And the general surgery and so forth, but I never saw him talk about those cases in the way he talked about his bariatric cases. And I didn't understand it until I got my hands in there and got to scrub it on those cases and watch them. Because as much as he talked about it, my training, I never saw a bariatric case. I didn't. I wouldn't have been able to describe to you what a gastric bypass was until I came out
Mm,
and joined their practice, and all of a sudden
Right.
things just started making sense. So,
wow.
yeah, from the standpoint of working with your dad, I mean that was just a cool experience to have been able to do that. He may have thought otherwise. He may have thought, man, this guy is driving me crazy, but
He's wearing me out.
but when you've got somebody with that kind of experience that you can call on and back you up, it feels like a tremendous safety net. I sort of feel like, there's really nothing I can screw up that he couldn't fix. So
Right.
so with my junior guys, I try to be that person for them.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely. And good for you for doing that, because everybody needs that. I think we are in a profession where sometimes we eat our own, and it's unfortunate.
mm,
I was just talking to somebody the other day, a surgeon. I won't get too detailed in case they're listening. But anyway, surgeons visit the OR a lot and they watch cases. And so I always hear about the dynamics of going back to practice and just hearing how some of these surgeons treat their junior partners almost like they see them as competition. And, you're thinking, and on the same token, the younger surgeons need to realize how hard we worked to get there, the time that we put in to build what we've built. But I have a new partner now. I was by myself for many years, and I've got a new partner now, and she's young, but like she not only, I always say you can find good surgeons, but it's really hard to find good people. Because by the time they're an adult, if they're a crappy person, it's really hard to convert them. But you can train an inexperienced surgeon up to be a more experienced surgeon. And especially in the world of bariatrics, you want somebody who's going to treat your patients with empathy and care and patience and all that stuff. So um, I love sharing everything I know with her because she works so hard at it and she pays so much attention to it. And you want to pass that along, and you know that when we were there, how important that played a role in our career to make us who we are now too.
Oh, 100%. I think as residency programs, the structure has changed. My intern year was the last year of unrestricted work hours. So my second through fifth year, we were restricted to 80 hours a week. Now, obviously, we snuck above that, but it was nothing like what the generations before us had been through. And I think that training actually took a big hit from that. More and more, I see young surgeons coming out of residency, and like me, they're just really not ready, as I wasn't, to be sort of set
Mm.
free in the wild again, because we just didn't have that kind of experience. Even the
Hmm.
fellows that come out, um, it's another year or two of extra experience, but they really need somebody to take them under their wing. I hate it
Yeah.
when I see somebody coming right out of training and they're hired by a hospital system and said, okay, and that just assumes they're ready to go and take off. And I don't
Right.
think that's
Build a
fair
program.
to it's not fair to the surgeon. It's not fair to the community. It's not fair to the patients or the hospital system. We need to understand there's a mentorship that needs to occur.
Right. No, absolutely.
So how did you transition from, they kind of absorbed your dad's practice? You were there for 2 years. What led you to go to Atlanta?
So I was 2 months from becoming a partner in that practice. So I would have my dad at that point had sort of retired from bariatrics and was doing vascular only. So the third person that was in the group with us and I were the two bariatric surgeons, and there were 9 general surgeons. So I spent half my week with the general surgeons and half my week in the bariatric office. So about 2 months before I was to become partner, yeah, I was invited to go find other opportunities. And so I said, I had opportunity to go and become an attending for with bariatric surgery with my where I trained in Greenville, South Carolina, which I had accepted that job, and we were actually looking at houses, and I was helping design the office and so forth. And the more my wife and I talked about it, we kept saying, well, if they don't do this, we shouldn't go. If they don't do this, we shouldn't go. At the end of the day, her parents and both of her sisters lived in Atlanta, and I'd gotten a job offer in Atlanta, so that won. So I came to Atlanta. I was the third person in on a very small group. So picture I went from this very large multi-specialty group that everything was sort of laid out for you. I had my own personal nurse who took care of everything for me, and it was catered to. And I thought this is what life is like, to go into this very small, bare bones practice with no EMR. Everything was written by hand. We had no EMA. I'm pulling my own patients out of the lobby, which we're sharing with an internal medicine doctor, and that. They had already signed a lease on a much nicer, larger office that there was no way we could afford that had a surgery center attached to it. We brought in 2 other very well-known surgeons into that group. Lee Scandalakis, who you've probably seen all his books that are out there, he and his dad's, and C. Dan Smith, who was sort of a mentor of mine, and we became this 5-person group that on paper looked like we should be doing great, and then the whole thing wasn't set up well, and it sort of after about 4 years just sort of went belly up. So everybody kind of went in their own directions. And I there was one other bariatric surgeon in the group, and I sort of drug him kicking and screaming across the street to the hospital and said, you know what? Let's hit the easy button. This private practice thing is for the birds. Let's just go get employed. And we sat across from the head of the physicians group, who was Piedmont Hospital, Atlanta, is a very large cardiothoracic presence and solid organ transplantation presence. That's where their where their economic engine is. And he looked across the table at us and said, "Boys, bariatric surgery is nowhere on our radar, but we'll see what we can do to help you out." And I realized I'm in a really bad negotiating position here. So luckily, it took them about 4 months to hand me a contract. It was double what anything I'd ever made in my life. And I looked at my wife and said, I realize we've been waiting on this. By the way, the last year of being in that old group, I hadn't taken home a paycheck, working like a dog, but never took home a paycheck. And I said, I think I want to turn this down and start my own practice. And she said,
Wow.
you better not be wrong. And I said,
Yeah.
Dr. Proctor, I like you. You are a rebel. Okay. I'm listening to all your stories, and you are like always taking and there's a book called The Obstacle is the Way. And I feel like that's how you've lived your life. Like
yeah,
always kind of like, I'm not going to take the easy way. I'm going to go this way, and maybe it'll work out. Hopefully it does. And obviously it has, but I admire that a lot.
Well, it's come with luck. It's come with a lot of hard work and people to help me out along the way. But I opened my practice in 2016. The space that we had been in, I kind of hid from the landlords for about a year while they were trying to beat the door down. That was about 2 months into the practice. I came in after some cases, and my girl at the front desk said, "Hey, this production company called and said they want to talk to you about doing a TV show on TLC for with bariatric surgery." And I just assumed it was a scam. So I said, "I'll tell you what. You know what? How did they find me? I've been in practice for 2 months. You tell them if they come back next Monday and they bring everybody lunch, I'll give them 5 minutes." And so they came back the following Monday. They brought lunch and they started talking about this show called that they were going to call Family by the Ton. And
Oh,
they already had
wow.
the family. They were good to go. They were looking all over town trying to find a surgeon to say yes and a hospital to say yes. And they had asked about 10 other people before me. And I think I was just the first to say yes and find a hospital that said yes, although they didn't really know what they were saying yes to.
Yeah.
And we were able to get this going. That was a big catalyst to help getting me off the ground.
Oh,
That
wow.
is that is awesome. See, that free lunch went a long way for him, right?
That's
Yeah.
right. It did. It did.
I obviously, and since then, now you've got 1,000 pound best friends, um, and you were 1,000 pound sisters. Obviously, you were season one and took care of Amy, Saul, Tammy, and then I took over in season two. But you know, I've told my story. Our very first episode for this podcast was just kind of people learning more about me. And I told my story about how I got approached and it had happened to me about 5 years prior and my issues. And I remember sitting down with my administrator when I considered 1,000 pound sisters. And and you and I've talked about this in private, but I really struggled with the way it was painted on TV. Um, and he kind of challenged me and he says, okay, we'll do something about it. Like you can say you don't like how it's portrayed on TV up to that point, but or you could change the narrative. And so did you go through any of that? I mean, because it's still your patients, and I think that's always something hard that's taken me time to get used to is at the end of the day, I made it very clear I'm not going to do something I wouldn't do or say because these are my patients. Even if you brought them to me, they're now my patient.
Yeah. And, as we've talked about before, when what you see on TV, and I see, I think it's the same with you, is what you get in real life. Um, I think that the networks are TLC in general. They were so used to 600 pound life, right? And sort of the shtick you get with that, which is, Dr. Now trying to shame and yell at people into doing what they're supposed to do, and that's become such an accepted norm that the TLC didn't know any different from that. And so the feedback I got was, you need to be more like Dr. Now. You need to yell more. You need to you know get all over these folks. And I said, that's not what I do. What
Right,
doctor do you go to that you would respond to that doctor and take them seriously and do the things they want to do because you yelled and screamed at them and shamed them?
right,
Just because somebody is overweight, and by the way, there's a million reasons for that, a lot of them genetic, uh, doesn't give you the right to yell and scream and shame at the patient. Nothing does.
right,
So I said, I'm not going to do that.
right,
And I think over time, um, the viewers have come to accept that and said, okay, you're you, Dr. Now's him. This is a different approach to doing this, right?
right.
And going back, I was so glad that they were able to continue 1,000 pound sisters with you up in Kentucky. You know, we operated on Amy. I realized she's still struggling with things. When I didn't operate on Tammy, it truly was she wasn't ready for this.
Right.
And I didn't know if she would mentally ever be in a place to be ready for it. And when I heard you had operated on her, and by the way, you did a great operation and the right operation. Um, I was a little nervous at first, but I see what I've seen in a lot of my other patients who started off at that size, which there is a mental hurdle they have to get through before they're going to be ready, right?
Yeah.
There's a different pathology from a patient who is 300 pounds to a patient who is 600 plus pounds overweight. They're generally enablers around them. So it's not just getting through the head and the hearts and mind of the patient. It's around the people that are surrounding them and taking care of them, love them, to understand that you've got to learn to love them in a different way.
Right.
And so that's been what the TV shows have taught me the most is how to work with and try to help people that are in that weight category because it really
Yeah.
is different.
It absolutely is. And I think that, it's, it still took another almost 2 years for us to get her ready. And I remembered when I first got involved with the show, I made the worst mistake ever. And I'm sure you did this and learned and stopped doing it too, is I read a comment, on a TLC post or something of a clip that I was on. And oh, good Lord, that was the worst thing I ever could have done. But, people would make comments. They would send me messages, when she's not listening to what you're doing, why don't you yell at her? Why don't you kick her out? Or why don't you do this? And I'm like, and, I realized that's the impression that's what they thought was appropriate. And I used to say, I don't have to enable her by doing surgery before she's ready. But like, why does she have to be on my timeline? Like, I should never go away. She just can't get certain things until she's ready because I don't want her to hurt herself. I don't want her to, it to be harmful to her. But I'm still going to be here. I'm still going to support you. And if you still show up and you're not successful yet, sometimes these people just need to know somebody that won't give up on them. And, like I like to say, meet them where they're at. And that's really all that she needs. She just wasn't ready, but she wasn't ready that she'll never be ready. She just wasn't ready. And we were ready. We were excited for her, but she had to be ready to take on what we knew that she was capable of doing. And I think, and I guarantee you've heard this before, but I want to hear from you. One of the biggest compliments that I have heard from my involvement in the show, and the thing that makes me feel the best, is for people to say, I watched this episode and it made me realize that there are bariatric surgeons out there that will treat me this way. And I got the courage to go see one in my community. Not that they came to see me, but that they came to, whether they're in Atlanta and they saw you, or they're in California and they saw a peer of ours out there, but they actually realized, oh my gosh, my experience can be this. They'll be patient with me. They'll meet me where I'm at. And I'm sure you've heard that too with your bedside manner.
Yeah, and again, just like you said, if the reason for doing the show is not so that I could tell people I'm on a show, right? It's because I know it's opened the doors for other people.
Right.
It's opened the doors for not only, as you said, that person who was maybe sitting in a different state somewhere and felt so nervous and didn't want to go do this, but maybe saw us and said, okay, maybe this isn't such a scary ordeal after all. But also for those people who are the heavier folks who've been told no over and over again, who thought there's just no hope for me, I can't do anything. I've had
Right.
those people come in and said, I had just given up. I wasn't trying, but now, you've given me hope that this can happen, right?
Right.
So if we've just helped out a handful of people, it's been totally worth, worth what that was about. So
And
yeah.
it's still a journey, right? Like you guys do the surgery, but they still have a lifelong journey after that. Their life kind of starts all over again. I think that one of the things that I never seen any of the shows. Even when we first met, Eric, I had never seen the show before. After we talked, I started doing some market research and looking at all the different shows just to see if what we were going to build for pop in the bariatric world, was appropriate, because we started in plastics, this multidisciplinary approach of mental health and nutrition and all of that. And one thing that I noticed on the show that you guys talked about, was like, there's all these instructions that he's given from these people that are like in another state. All right, now you need to change the way you eat right now, and you need to lose this weight right now, or you're not having surgery. You need to move your life all the way here and move your family. I mean, that's a lot to do on your own and still battle the disease of obesity that starts from the inside out. And a lot of it is right up here. And so I think that it's amazing to know that you have that support from your surgeon. But I think that what's even, because we've been working with Tammy now probably since like June or July. And I've seen a huge change in her mental health just by having someone to talk to in outside of family and outside of the regular circle of friends. So I think that the mission to let everyone know that it's possible, even if you may have external factors or an environment that are not always conducive to growth, that there are now resources that we can create an environment for you where you do have that support alongside a surgeon who does care about your progress and who does care about your entire journey, not just up to surgery or the 1 year follow-ups and lab checks after, yearly.
You know, bariatric surgery in its early days, we're all general surgeons, right? And if you're having some gallbladder pains and you come see me, we diagnose you with gallstones, we'll schedule your surgery, I'll take out your gallbladder a week later, I'll say you're feeling good, no problems, okay, call me if you need me. And unfortunately, I think that's the way bariatric surgery was managed for generations, honestly. And industry had not caught up with us. We didn't have the vitamin supplementation. Patients were getting some severe deficiencies and so forth. And the research wasn't there. Even bariatric surgeons didn't understand how these operations worked. One of the things that was really important to me when I started this practice was that we needed to change that model. And ever from the beginning, I wanted to have a lifetime of care model, because bringing the patients back even twice a year, every single year, putting them on the body composition scale, showing them objectively, this is what your muscle mass is doing, this is what your fat mass is doing. Hey, in the last 6 months, you've gained 8 pounds. Let's go ahead and nip this in the bud. Let's get you back into the dietitian. Let's re-engage in the exercise program. Let's see you get that back off again when you come back in 6 months. That's been a key to maintaining the longevity of this weight loss. Too often, patients are seen for the better part of a year. They're lost to follow up. You see them back 3 or 4 years later and, hey, I did great for a while, but now I've regained my weight. What do I need to do? Well, unfortunately, you reset your weight high again. So I really feel like I liken it to cancer care almost. It's a chronic disease. I tell patients I wouldn't remove your breast cancer and tell you to come back if it ever comes back again. We would monitor it every year and would keep a close eye on you and make sure that if we see any kind of early warning signs, we're going to jump on top of it.
I use that's such a great example, because I'll tell patients before they have their surgery on their last education day, I always say, I want you to understand that you're going to have the disease of obesity for the rest of your life, but I hope no one knows it. And just like you walk into this office and you may tell us that you have hypertension, but your blood pressure was normal, we didn't argue with you, because we also saw that you're on a medication that manages your hypertension and keeps it under control. And you also see your doctor regularly to keep it controlled. And that's your chronic disease. And on one hand, I don't want you to see your family doctor 3 years from now weighing 175 pounds and tell them that you think that you're morbidly obese, because they'll probably send you back to me or to psych and say, what's going on? But your mentality is I have this chronic disease, but it is no longer visible only because I have my regular follow-up with my team. I had my permanent change, which is my surgery, i.e. the hypertensive patient takes their medicine every day. But I follow up with my mental health. I follow up with the dietitian. I track my body composition, which I think is the most overlooked thing in our profession, that people focus just on numbers of pounds instead of teaching people, like you do, obviously, of that it's not about losing weight, it's about losing body fat. But I think it is a mentality that you really want patients, because I feel like that's a way they'll take it serious enough. Because like you said, they're used to seeing a surgeon, and if the surgical complication window is over, they're like, oh, I'm good. I got this.
Yeah. Yeah.
because
Well,
that first year it falls off, whether they work really hard or not, it will come
right.
off. And the hardest thing to do is not weight loss. The hardest thing to do is weight loss maintenance.
That's very true. Anybody who would say, surgery is the easy way out, I would challenge them to look into this. Um, you know, just like, why don't you operate on patient X right away? They need help. Well, sure they do. And the surgery itself is probably the easiest part of this whole thing. You could have operated on Tammy the first day you ever met her, right?
Right.
But you
Yep.
understood that she was a million miles from where she needed to be ready to be successful after the surgery.
Right.
So that's key. It's on us to teach these patients that yes, you can lose a lot of weight, whether it's with surgery, diet and exercise, a GLP-1 or something like that. But anybody who's not doing what they can to maintain or gain the muscle mass during this weight loss process is losing probably the same percentage of lean muscle mass as they are body fat. Muscle mass being their number one metabolic engine for their body. At the end of the day, they might have lost 100 pounds, but they've also lost metabolic capacity because they have less muscle. So that's a really important point to, another reason to keep going along with these patients, putting them on the DEXA scanner or the body composition scale and show them objectively, listen, you've lost 10 pounds of muscle. We've got to get this back
Yeah.
because, that's 500 calories a day that
Right.
your
You're
body
more
could be
prone to
burning
weight
that
regain.
it no
Right.
longer is. That's right. That's
Yeah.
right.
No, it's so true. So I got to ask this question before we run out of time, and I'm sure Laura has more too, but I just want to make sure, like, we've kind of talked about your whole journey and obviously your involvement of your specialty on TV. We're now in 2025. There's probably no more awareness than we've ever had of the disease of obesity. If there's one thing the GLPs have done, it's done a lot. But if there's one thing it's done, and whether it's good or bad, it's probably because of the dollars of big pharma is behind it. It has raised awareness of the disease of obesity that everybody, I think, who battles with the disease has benefited. I think it's raised awareness that it's a disease. I think it's raised awareness to cause people all the way from administration at the Capitol all the way down to realize it's a disease and start digging into how do we treat it and maybe how we prevent it. Big question, but what would you love to see over the next 5 to 10 years as we start to tackle, I think, the biggest epidemic we've ever seen in our lives?
Yeah, so I think you hit the nail on the head. Prevention would be the first place to start. We're seeing the rise in class 3 obesity. The higher the BMI, the higher your fasting, see that rise over year after year after year. Unfortunately, pediatric obesity is on a scale going faster than adult obesity right now. So the problem is getting worse and not better. And I think all of that goes back to our food supply. There is such a difference in what we are exposed to, what we're eating and drinking today than they were back in the 1930s, 40s, and 50s.
Yeah.
Uh, the analogy that I give my patients, I know you've heard this over and over again. There is this concept or this idea that if a patient or a person is overweight, they overeat, they eat too much, and the obese patient will even think that of themselves, even when they say, "Yeah, Dr. Proctor, I generally just eat one meal a day." In their mind, they overeat. They need a pill to decrease their appetite.
Mhm.
And I tell them, think about this: 1930s, 40s, 50s. There was no fast food. Maybe starting up in the 1950s, but it wasn't a way of life. If you wanted a
Right.
soda, you had to go to the drugstore. You couldn't go to the grocery store and get it. If you went to the grocery store, you had a butcher shop, some canned goods, a bakery, and some produce. You didn't have aisles of chips and aisles of snacks and aisles of craft beers and all these ice creams and everything. You had your basics. In those days, if you were overweight, which was rare, you probably overate because you had to get that many calories in.
Right.
Today, I can go have a couple of frappuccinos and I've had more calories than I need for the day. right? And it's
Right.
probably not the only
Wow.
thing I've had.
And you're
So
not full.
I think there needs to be awareness of the calorie density we have out there. And at some point, it's got to back off and people understand that, these things that we like and the food that they're ordering on Uber Eats and we're going out to restaurants and getting may be good, but it is so calorie dense that we're just killing ourselves.
Yeah.
You
And
know,
it,
it's crazy
once,
because oh, so I'm sorry, Dr. Parker, go ahead.
no, I was just going to say the damage is done early on.
Yes.
Once that weight
Yeah.
is there, the weight is there to stay. People don't understand once they've gained X amount of body fat, that's the amount they're going to have. They can diet and exercise, lose it, but it's always going to come back. It's kind of like donating blood. You'll decrease your hemoglobin, but a week later it's back where it started. That's just the way the body works.
Yeah, so I was gonna say I've been since December like tracking my food, like and how much it weighs and stuff like that. And I realized I had no concept of how much food weighed at all. I was like, oh yeah, that must be like an ounce. It's like 0.06 of an ounce actually. Oh, that must be, that must be 6 ounces of chicken. No, that's only 3 ounces. So when I put the actual, chicken and the vegetables and on a plate, that is like maybe 600 calories. It is a full plate of food. It's
Yeah.
like it's full, like, and it's like 600 calories. And so I was thinking about that because when you said one frappuccino, which I don't do any of that stuff, but there was a time where I kind of got like, oh, 0 calories. I can have like this little thing in my water and it's 0 calories. But then I started feeling like bloated and I started feeling weird and like, and my nutrition, one of my nutrition team, she was like, yeah, because that's acidic. Like you're used to eating whole foods. So if you want to flavor it, just flavor it with fruit. And I was like, oh yeah, you did tell me that. But I was kind of getting into the culture of even our ambassadors who are like, yeah, and these are 0 calories, 0 calories. But then there's like so many ingredients that don't really mesh well and can cause swelling and the sodium and the and all that stuff. So I love that point of your challenge, Eric, that you said like day one challenge, like eat whole foods. I was like, yeah, that's a really good challenge right there for
Well, I
people.
think there's so much information out there. And, patients are like, do I eat vegan? Do I eat paleo? Do I eat this way? Do I eat low carb? You can find a study to support everything. And it just gets so confusing. And, I really have tried to look at people and I say, I want you to look at your food and look at the back of it. What is food for? And I was having a conversation with a lady the other day. I said, what's food for? She just kind of stared at me. And I said, so no, give me the politically correct answer. Don't give me like say, oh, well, I love it. What is food for? It's for nutrition. Okay. So if there is an ingredient on the back of that food that is not nutritious, why would we put it in our body? And I'm not saying I've never eaten something that didn't have these things. We all do it. But the point is, I wanted her to understand that all the ingredients on there that was an emulsifier or a dye or some kind of chemical, it wasn't there to give her nutrition, but it still has a purpose. Why did the company take the time to put it in there? To either color it to make it a kid want to buy it because now the Fruit Loops are brighter than they were 40 years ago, or to make them want more. So at least it raises awareness, of why am I craving these calorie dense foods and things like that. And I think that it's been really cool to see the feedback of people sending me messages like, wow, I actually feel so much better. And, this one lady sent me a message. She said, I got this. She described some nut bread or something. And I'm like, I'll be honest with you. I'm not sure what that is. What's the ingredients? And she messaged back. She's like, oh my gosh, I can't pronounce them, And I'm like, well,
Yeah.
that's good. I'm not picking on you. We're learning. But I think we're surgeons. We love to operate. We love to help these people. But, I equate it to we've got to be careful and not just focus on the best chemotherapy agents in the world for lung cancer and never disrupt the tobacco industry.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. Listen, my dream would be to wake up tomorrow. Our food supply has completely changed. It's gone back to where it was maybe even 100 years ago, and we're all eating much, much healthier. We don't have all these chemicals. What you just described, If you take out the produce section, is 98% of everything in the grocery store now, right? It's very, very difficult to eat healthy and to
Yeah.
avoid these kind of things. So listen, if we could go back to that and not have our pediatric population out there growing in obesity as rapidly as they are, shoot, I'll go back to taking out gallbladders. That's fine with me. I'll find another day job. Maybe I'll go back to selling, atlases or something like that.
That's
But
what I
you
was
know
going to
what?
say. You've got
We're-
options. You could go back
yeah,
to
yeah, right.
Russia.
And I'll put it out there on LinkedIn. But it would be a good day. We are there to take care of the end result of a lifetime of this happening, and it happens to different extents to different people, right? It's not just. I always tell my patients, you could take two different people born at the exact same time and have those two people eat and drink things exactly the same throughout their entire lives. And if one is 10% more efficient at storing away calories than the other one, that patient is going to weigh more, and that person didn't do anything different from person B, right? So it affects everybody differently. That's why we can't judge each other out there and say, oh, look at that person. They must be lazy. They must always eat poorly and so forth. They just may have genetics that, by the way, would
Right.
have kept them alive 30,000 years ago,
Right.
that today are
Exactly.
a detriment. So, it's let's look at each other with a little bit more respect and a little bit more empathy and understanding, and realize that everybody has their own crosses to bear, and we're there to help if need be.
I absolutely love that. And that's a great way to end the episode. So, Dr. Proctor, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. If we wanted to follow and stalk you and keep up with you, where can we find you?
Yeah, I don't hide much. I'm on social media, Instagram, Dr. or actually it's Charles Proctor, MD. And I think Facebook and TikTok are all Charles Proctor, MD. So I didn't get real creative with those. So I'm flirting around, and once in a blue moon, I'll have something interesting to say on there. So
Yeah, and you also
look it
have
up.
a season that is it showing right now, or is it's not?
Yeah, we just finished season 3 of Thousand Pound
Okay.
Best Friends. It just finished airing. I've even got my little sticker on here. I survived season 3 of Thousand Pound Best Friends. Um, Season 2 of Too Large has been sitting on the shelf now for a couple of years. I'm really hoping it airs because we've had some really nice successes on that. Last I heard, I was told March, but you know how that changes. So
Yeah.
stay tuned for that.
We will definitely stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with us, and we will see you next time on the Pop Culture Podcast.